I had always found solace in routines, the predictability of life giving me a sense of control. My days typically began with the grind of paperwork at Tyndall Manufacturing, a company my family had built over generations. But my true escape was my backyard. It wasn't just land to me, it was a sanctuary where I could step away from numbers and negotiations, a place to reconnect with something simpler. That Friday morning, though, my life was anything but routine. Little did I know, the events that would unfold later that day would shatter any semblance of stability I had built. It started with something ordinary, dropping off my car for repairs. The mechanic, an old friend of the family, offered to drop me home instead of the usual back and forth. It seemed like a harmless decision at the time, a choice made for convenience rather than necessity. The warm sun and the promise of a quiet afternoon tending to the yard convinced me to accept his offer. It felt like a good day, a chance to unwind. But as it turned out, fate had other plans, unraveling secrets I could never have anticipated. The air was mild and inviting that Friday afternoon, the kind of day that encouraged procrastination. After leaving my car at the shop for some much-needed repairs, I decided to forgo the hassle of returning to the office. The mechanic, always eager to help, suggested dropping me off at home and promised to deliver the car by evening. Standing in my yard under the bright sky with a rake in hand, I considered the tasks ahead, nothing pressing, just the sort of mundane chores that kept my mind occupied. Little did I know those few hours of tranquility would soon give way to revelations that would shake the foundation of my world. We've got a pretty big backyard, and I was near the edge, cleaning up some leaves, when I saw my brother's red Corvette roll into the driveway. Perfect, I thought. He only ever shows up here when he wants to borrow something and never brings it back. As I walked toward the driveway, I heard my son Sam yell out, "Hey, Dad, what's got you visiting the land of losers?" Dad? Why did Sam call my brother Dad? And what on earth did he mean by land of losers? My brother chimed in, "I'm just dropping off Uncle Joe's circular saw. I messed up the power cord. He needs to fix it so I can finish my project at home. Is the old man around?" The old man? My name's Joe, and I wouldn't exactly call myself clueless. But maybe I am? Should I just stay out of the way and listen to what's happening here? Naturally, I turned on my phone to record the conversation. Sam shot back, "Clueless isn't here. He doesn't usually show up before 5, and honestly, I try to avoid him. So no, I don't think he's around. But hey, since school's out, when can I come and stay at your place? It's way more fun there than here. I'd love to have you over, but your mom wants to spend as much time with you as she can. You're her only kid, and when you're gone, she'll be lonely. So give her some space on this. She's supposed to meet me Thursday afternoon so we can talk about you staying with me for a week or two this summer." Then Sam asked, "Why doesn't Mom just divorce Clueless and move in with you?" I had no idea she'd been spending regular afternoons at my brother's. Oh no, things were starting to click into place and none of it felt right. Maybe I am clueless after all. Eric proudly added, "Since I got her pregnant with you, I've been asking her about that every month. She always says, 'You're a great lay, but you'd make a terrible husband.' I have a husband I adore and cherish. Every moment with him feels like I'm the luckiest woman alive. Sure, my peaks with you are mind-blowing, but he makes me feel loved. I love him, and I don't love you. And that, son," my brother continued, "is why she won't divorce Joe Tyndall, but still hooks up with Eric Tyndall now and then. Anyway, I've got to get going. I'll see you tomorrow at your grandparents' place for the annual birthday and Memorial Day party." I felt my legs turn to jelly as I slowly sank to the ground, sliding down the side of the garage and landing in the hosta patch. It felt as if my whole world had just crumbled. The realization that my son wasn't truly mine by blood was a blow I could hardly process. But the bigger shock was discovering that my wife had not only gotten pregnant by my brother, but that she'd been sleeping with him regularly. It was more than I could bear. I somehow managed to stumble back to where I'd been working and collapsed onto the old rope swing, the same swing I had spent countless hours pushing my son on, watching him laugh and enjoy every moment. I sat there, overwhelmed, tears falling until they pooled into the mud beneath me. What was I supposed to do now? Before I made any decisions, I needed to understand the full scope of the situation. Then it hit me, my only hope for answers: the DNA test. A few years ago, Carol, Sam, and I had all taken the 23andMe test. How could the results be wrong? But then a thought struck me. What if Carol had discarded my sample and replaced it with Eric's? If she had, she could easily have hidden the truth about Sam's parentage. That would be one of the most vile betrayals imaginable. Stealing away my legacy and replacing it with the blood of that bastard. Denying me the truth about a child I loved like my own. Once that thought crossed my mind, the possibility of redemption slipped away, and I knew I needed to confront my current reality. I'm Joe Tyndall, 43 years old. My weight hasn't changed much since my college days, still around 175 pounds. I'm lean, never much of an athlete in school, though I did run track and was good at long-distance events. Now the runs I used to enjoy have become a rare occurrence, often interrupted by family and work. But I still manage to get out for a few miles each week, sometimes even running in charity races like 5Ks and 10Ks. As for my job, I hold the dual titles of Chief Financial Officer and Chief Operating Officer at Tyndall's Machine Company in my hometown. The company has been in my family for generations, starting with my great-grandfather, who was a blacksmith making plowshares and putting iron rims on wooden wagon wheels. My grandfather and father followed in his footsteps, each adding modern metalworking technology to the business. Now, we specialize in manufacturing precision parts for the aerospace industry and providing metal replacement parts for various sectors. My father, Edward, is the president of our 50-person business, and my brother, Eric, is the chief marketing officer. Despite not going to college, Dad trained at one of the best trade schools available. I, on the other hand, earned degrees in industrial engineering and accounting and serve as CFO and COO. Eric and I were complete opposites physically. At 6'3" and 50 pounds heavier than me, he was a typical jock, loud, brash, and often a bully. In high school, he was a star running back, and a small college scholarship helped him through school, while I worked part-time and took out loans. Eric only graduated because professors passed him to keep him eligible for football. His physical education degree didn't serve him well, so he started at Tyndall as a junior mechanic. Precision work wasn't his strength, but his name and football fame helped him connect with customers. Although he couldn't speak in detail about our work, he was excellent at keeping clients satisfied. He played a valuable role, even if he didn't have the technical knowledge. Like many family-run businesses, we had our disagreements. One example was Eric's request for a commission on new sales, despite already having a good salary. I used that moment to push for full control over the income from patents I had developed. Dad caved to Eric's request quickly, but I had to fight hard to get the earnings from my patents. My wife, Carol, and I met during a 5K charity run for a local library. I first noticed her because of her impressive figure, particularly her toned physique. We hadn't even spoken yet, but I was already intrigued. I kept pace with her for most of the race, sneaking glances at her as I followed. When another runner dropped his water bottle, Carol stumbled and I helped steady her. She thanked me, introduced herself, and we started running together. That was the beginning of our relationship. Carol was an English teacher with a degree in secondary education. A year after we met, we were married in her hometown church. After 2 wonderful years of marriage, we decided to start a family. However, despite our best efforts, Carol couldn't get pregnant. We tried everything. Diet changes, different positions, and tracking her ovulation. We didn't want to get fertility tests yet, so we just kept trying. Eventually, we stopped stressing about it and returned to just enjoying each other. A couple of months later, Carol missed her period. She didn't want to tell me at first, but when it happened again, we both knew something was different. I was overjoyed because family meant everything to me. The Tyndall family had been a part of the community for over a century, and we took great pride in our legacy. Carol's pregnancy wasn't easy. She was bedridden for the last 2 months under doctor's orders, and the delivery was complicated. We almost lost both her and our son, Sam. His size caused complications, and he had to be delivered via C-section. During the surgery, the doctor warned us against trying for another child, as it could be life-threatening for both Carol and any future babies. So we decided to undergo surgery to ensure it wouldn't happen again. Sam, our miracle boy, was full of energy. He loved playing rough with me, much to Carol's dismay. We spent countless hours playing sports, but his grades were just above average. Not exceptional, but not bad either. Sam was everything we'd hoped for, and more. Things began to unravel after Sam's 15th birthday. I chalked it up to the usual teenage rebellion. He started pulling away. We used to spend hours chatting and tossing a ball, but now he was too absorbed in his phone or Game Boy to talk. When I pushed him for a conversation, he'd get grumpy and disrespectful. It seemed like he thought my job as an accountant wasn't manly enough, which might have been influenced by the fact that he had outgrown me physically and was becoming more muscular. Meanwhile, Carol continued to excel in her career. Her dedication and intellect had earned her the position of principal at McKinley School, an institution for students who struggled academically and socially. But the stress of managing disruptive kids started to affect our home life. She'd snap at me over little things, making sharp comments about tasks I'd done, or hadn't done, according to her standards. Still, these tensions didn't seem to affect our intimacy. In bed, she was always loving, and our intimacy life was fulfilling. Then, one evening, everything changed. I overheard Eric telling Sam that he, not me, was Sam's father and that he'd been sleeping with Carol for over 17 years. I couldn't believe it. It sounded outrageous, but what did I truly know for sure? The resemblance between Eric, Edward, and Sam was striking. Same build, same features. And I felt a gnawing suspicion in my gut. That night, I watched Carol closely. Nothing seemed off. Dinner was normal, and when Sam left for the movies with his friends, Carol and I started cleaning up. She asked me to load the dishwasher while she went to the bathroom. When she returned, the only thing she was wearing was a lace apron. She acted casual, telling me to hurry up, that she had plans for me later. We laughed and flirted while finishing the chores, and then headed to bed, where I was treated to some of the best closeness we'd had in a while. She was as responsive as ever, and I could tell she was genuinely enjoying herself. There was no sign of her faking anything. Afterward, we cuddled and reaffirmed our love for each other. The next morning, we drove to my parents' house to celebrate my father, Edward's 70th birthday. Carol didn't like riding in my Volvo, so we took her Lexus instead. When we arrived, my mom, Sally, greeted us first by hugging Carol, then Sam, and lastly me. The same order followed with my dad. I was curious to see the interaction between Carol and Eric. Eric greeted Sam warmly, then reached out to hug Carol. His hug was full of enthusiasm, but Carol's response was cold. She barely reacted, and I could swear I saw a look of annoyance on her face. This wasn't how someone who'd been involved with another person for 17 years would act. When it was my turn, Eric gave me a chest bump, his 46-inch chest thudding against my 36-inch frame in a display of dominance. I began to sense something wasn't right, so I decided to dig a little deeper, not so much as an investigator, but more like the bumbling fool trying to stumble upon a secret. During a lull in conversation, I casually asked Eric, "Hey, I need to meet with our CPA Thursday afternoon. You going to be around to cover for me?" I knew Eric didn't understand anything about accounting, so he wouldn't be able to help anyone who called in my absence. "No, I'll be out," he replied. "Big project coming up." I turned to Carol, who blew a bubble in her iced tea, her usual sign that I was getting close to something. I pressed on. "Is it the kind of project that'll get you all sweaty and tired?" Eric brushed it off. "Nah, I've worked with this person a lot and always come out on top." The look Carol shot him was scorching, and the tension in the room was palpable. It was as if everyone at the table knew exactly what was going on. No one made a sound, not even the clink of a fork or the rattle of ice in a glass. The silence felt heavier than midnight in a graveyard. I realized then that everyone was aware of the affair. They thought I didn't know, and I played the fool, soaking in the truth beneath the awkwardness. Finally, Dad broke the silence. "All right, let's figure out who's doing what." Dad started by saying, "I'm glad you boys could make it for my birthday. This 160-acre tract was bought by my grandfather when it was far from town. He'd be proud it's still in the family, and our business is doing well under your leadership, Eric and Joe. I've decided to retire as president of Tyndall, and Eric will take over. There'll also be a change in salary structure. Joe's salary will always be 75% of Eric's. I want Joe to stay and be rewarded for his work. With Joe's income from patents, both of you will have similar earnings." Carol gave my arm a reassuring squeeze and smiled at me. I couldn't help but ask, "So I'll be answering to Eric? The same Eric who can't tell a CNC machine from a popcorn maker? This is a disaster waiting to happen." Eric shot back, "Look, little brother, I've always been the one to take charge while you've been stuck counting beans. It takes an alpha male to lead, not a weakling like you. Get over it, Joe. Once again, I win and you lose." "Enough," Dad interjected. "Eric, you're not the boss man. I'm still the chairman and own all the stock. You'll run the business under my guidance. This company's been in the family for over a century, and I won't let it fall apart now. We're Tyndalls, and our legacy is in our hands." He pointed to pictures of past Tyndall men on the wall. Curious, I asked, "Dad, which one is Grandpa?" "Grandpa's on the left, then my father, and I'm at the far end. I thought you'd know that." I hesitated, then asked, "I'm just confirming something. Looking at those pictures, I don't look like any Tyndall." Not the same build, hair color, or facial features. Eric and Sam do, but I don't get it. Mom and Dad both froze. Mom's shoulders slumped and Dad's face turned red. Silence filled the room as everyone exchanged tense glances. I knew the best way to get the truth was to throw something shocking out there and let them squirm. Dad sighed heavily. Joe, it's time you knew the family secret. Your mother and I were planning to marry when she got drunk at her bachelorette party and got pregnant. She thought I was the father, but she had no way of knowing. We married before she knew she was pregnant, and I thought I was the dad. You were a weak and sickly baby, and we thought it was because of your mother's complications. We almost lost you to the mumps. We didn't figure out you weren't my biological son until you were about 10. Your mother had hidden the fact that she'd slept with someone else before we married. When DNA testing became available, we tested, and it turned out you weren't mine. Eric was. This was not the revelation I had expected. I'd been fishing for answers about Sam's real father, and instead I was hit with this. Now I had even more questions, but I didn't know how to process it all. Mom spoke softly. Joe, none of this changes how much we love you. We raised you as our son, and we still do. I was grateful for her words, but they didn't answer the questions I had about Sam. Okay, Dad, I get why I don't look like a Tyndall. But why doesn't Sam have my body type instead of looking like you and Eric? Dad took a deep breath and continued. Joe, you and Carol tried so hard to have a baby, but it became too stressful. Carol thought she was failing you and came to your mother for advice. We realized that you were likely sterile from the mumps, so, for the sake of your marriage and the Tyndall legacy, we decided Eric would impregnate Carol. She was reluctant at first, but eventually saw the benefits. You wanted a family, and Eric and Carol gave you what you couldn't. We hoped this wouldn't come to light, but with DNA tests and genetic differences, it was bound to eventually. My mind was reeling. I felt like a tornado of emotions was tearing through me, but I couldn't find the words to express it. Mom and Carol surrounded me, hugging me tenderly, both with tears in their eyes, feeling my pain. Mom whispered, My son, I'm so proud of you. Carol murmured, My husband, I love you so much. Dad spoke carefully. We hoped you wouldn't be hurt by this, but we wanted you to know how much we all love you. I stared at Dad, my mind racing. So, Edward, is it okay if I call you Edward now that I know you're not my father? Why would you think I wouldn't mind being humiliated by my own family? Sam suddenly chimed in. Now you know how I feel. I've had to live with people thinking you're my father instead of a real man like Eric. Geez. Everyone's gaze turned to Sam, his arrogance making the tension even thicker. Carol slapped Sam across the face, her voice rising. Joe's been the best father to you. He gave everything for you, always. I've seen 1,000 kids with worse dads, but none better than him. You should count yourself lucky he raised you. I sarcastically muttered, Oh, nice of you to finally share your concern for my feelings. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Instead of lying all these years, you could have told me right away. I bet you had a good laugh behind my back while I boasted about having such a great son. Instead, I was clueless Joe, right? The room went quiet again, the tension hanging thick in the air. Dad spoke up. We couldn't tell you, Joe. It would have been too painful, and we hoped it would stay hidden. Plus, we needed you at the company. You're the brains behind everything. We'd be lost without you. And truth be told, we couldn't afford anyone else as good as you. A headhunter told us your job was worth more than double what we've been paying you. I could barely process it. So, you encouraged my brother to have a baby with my wife instead of me? You kept me working for less than I deserved just so your profits and dividends stayed high. You made me think I'd be running things one day, but apparently, blood matters more than talent. I couldn't take it anymore. I can't believe what I'm hearing. Next thing you'll tell me is that my wife is still sleeping with that bastard brother of mine. The room held its breath. Would she admit it? Or would she keep up the lies? After a long silence, Carol finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry, Joe. I never wanted to hurt you. You have to understand how stressed I've been at work. I don't love him. I hate him for what he is. But I needed him to cope with everything. I'm so sorry. She crumpled to the floor, her shoulders shaking. My instinct told me to go to her, but my mind screamed, Stop! She did this to herself, and now she had to face the consequences. Dad, looking defeated, added, I'm sorry, son. But Son, you're a damn hypocrite. Calling me son after everything you've done to destroy my life. You barely showed me any affection growing up, always favoring Eric. Then you encouraged my wife to betray me, pushing his child on me as mine, all while laughing at how clueless I was about the utter disrespect you had for me. I couldn't hold back anymore. I'm done with this mess. You acted like you were doing this for me, but you were screwing me over for your own selfish reasons. None of it was for my good. It's all been heartbreaking. I felt like an orphan, abandoned, with no one to turn to. A heartfelt, screw you, to every single one of you. My voice was shaking with anger as I turned to leave. But just as I reached the door, a heavy hand grabbed my arm. Look, Joe, I'm sorry. Since this means so much to you, I'll stop sleeping with your wife. I've been with her for so long, she's all stretched out now, and I'd prefer something tighter. So I'm giving her back to you. The sheer nerve of that guy, handing my wife back to me like some used object. I was about to leave when Eric grabbed me and spun me around. The motion caught me off guard, but it worked out. I threw a punch, aiming for his nose, but instead of hitting his face, I landed a solid blow to his throat. His eyes bulged, and he stopped mocking me, choking out only guttural sounds. He collapsed, clutching his neck, unable to see, let alone speak. This was my chance. I stepped back and kicked him in the groin as hard as I could. The scream that followed was pure agony. Carol and Sam rushed to his side, but they couldn't have been more different in their reactions. Sam was trying to comfort Eric, while Carol was kicking him, screaming, "You deserve this and worse." I walked away from the chaos, climbed into Carol's car, and deliberately backed it into Eric's Corvette. As I sped off, I clipped Edward's new truck. My emotions were a mess, and I barely managed to keep the car on the road. After a while, I found an old, abandoned gas station and stopped. I cried until I thought I might drown in my own tears. Then the rage took over. I pounded the dashboard, my frustration boiling over. Eventually, exhaustion hit. Weak and numb, I heard my phone buzzing with messages from Carol. I sighed. What was I supposed to do now? Nothing could undo what had happened. 3 days ago, I was on top of the world, and now everything had fallen apart. I wasn't just betrayed. I was a fool, a bastard. My mother wasn't even married to my biological father. It was a complete mess. But somehow, I still had options. Option 1, stay with the job and take the pay raise, but report to Eric or Edward. I'd see them every day, reliving the pain. No thanks. Option 2, slip away quietly. Let the Tyndalls go on without me. But they hadn't cared before. Why would they care now? So that wasn't for me either. Option 3, get even. Play the game with the family of snakes, but on my terms. Make them regret every lie, every betrayal. Yeah, that was the one. I gathered my stuff, my computer, paperwork, a few clothes, loaded up the Volvo. Bullet, Sam's dog, wouldn't stop bothering me. He always hated me, and now he was making a scene while I packed. He even left me a parting gift, a massive dump by the house. Laughing, I scooped it up and took it into the bedroom. I placed it right on our old wedding quilt, the one my mother and grandmother made. The quilt was a patchwork of memories. Wedding rings, clothes we wore as kids, and our names stitched in. It was the perfect spot for a steaming pile of dog crap, topped off with my wedding ring. Carol would get the message. I then destroyed the framed photos of Carol and Eric's son, hammering a nail through the stack, sending glass flying. It was all a final act of defiance. With that, I was done. Nothing kept me tied to this place anymore. I loaded my Volvo and drove across town to an extended stay hotel. After unloading, I dropped the car at the airport parking and rented another one. My plan was simple: disappear and make sure the snakes never found me. I arrived at my new base of operations, an anonymous rental car, and from there, an Uber took me to pick up Sam's car and stash it in a storage unit. Once I'm settled, I'll sell it. It's in my name anyway, since Sam couldn't get insured after his endless speeding tickets. Dinner was a solo affair. Pizza and beer delivered to my room. I didn't want to be seen, not while I had some work to do. First, I moved my personal funds, ensuring I alone controlled them. Closed joint credit cards and left Carol the equivalent of her last 2 paychecks in the account. The rest, including the entire college fund I'd been saving for Sam, was gone. He'll need to ask his real father for that now. It took me a while to fall asleep. I kept thinking about the good times with my family, but reality set in. The people I loved didn't care about me, so why should I care about them? That mental reset shifted me from clueless Joe to fearsome Joe. Tomorrow, fearsome Joe would hit Tyndall Manufacturing. Since it was Sunday, no one would be there. Perfect for what I had in mind. It actually made me sleep easier. The next morning, I parked the rental car a little way from Tyndall Manufacturing's entrance. I could have parked closer, but that would have raised suspicion. Inside, I disabled the security alarm, then rearmed it and headed straight for my office. As CFO, I had access to everything. Tyndall had multiple accounts, so I transferred all the funds into the main one, reserving enough for 2 payrolls. I maxed out the business line of credit and moved that too. The money went straight to the company's international account in the Caymans, perfectly legal. This account had been set up years ago as a clearinghouse for our European transactions. Next, I had some fun. I changed the login credentials for every account, making it nearly impossible for anyone to access them. They wouldn't even know where to begin since the banks never sent paper statements. I updated the mailing address to a random location in Montana, then sent out closure notices for utilities: electricity, gas, water, phone, and internet. The Tyndalls had always kept paper records, but 5 years ago I switched everything to the cloud. The only physical files left were vehicle titles and warranties, which I controlled. I changed all the passwords and logins, even for the CNC machines. Eric's office was next. I rifled through his computer and found some interesting files. Videos of him sleeping with employees, local wives, and, of course, Carol. I copied them onto a thumb drive and left the computer untouched. This would be for later. My final stop was the utility room, a concrete-walled, locked fortress where the electricity for the entire plant came in. Only the electrician and I had access, and I was about to shut everything down. The power company would take a while to respond, but by the time they did, I'd have locked everything down. I replaced all the locks and tossed the keys into a bucket of cleaner fluid, erasing any trace of ownership. Walking out of the building was bittersweet. This was where I grew up, where I envisioned my future. I had planned on becoming president, with Sam eventually taking over. But now, that dream was shattered, just like so many others. Over the years at Tyndall, I'd attended conventions and meetings while Eric took his buddies out drinking and to dance clubs. Now, I was eyeing this new world as a potential job market. I didn't bother reading the dozens of messages from my family. They were the same. We love you, we're sorry, and please talk to us. We did this for you, not to hurt you. My mother even begged me to forgive her for getting pregnant with me and staying married to Edward. Then the number 17 hit me like a brick. Because Carol had been sleeping with him for 17 years. My mother was just a one-night mistake. Tuesday morning, I called my attorney, Bob Carson, to discuss my options. He had a 3 p.m. slot available, so I went back to my apartment, grabbed the documents he might need, and got ready for the meeting. My initial plan was to file for divorce on the grounds of adultery, but I knew that would require moving Carol to another state, a move I doubted she'd agree to. I told Bob about the affair and made it clear that I wasn't paying child support. I was fine with a 50-50 split, but I wanted to keep everything I had, which wasn't much. I didn't own any stock in Tyndall MFG, only a salary and some patent income. Tyndall had been shortchanging me with a subpar salary that I once thought would lead to a bigger role, maybe even stock ownership. Carol's income as a school principal was similar to mine, so Bob thought the divorce would go smoothly, unless she fought it. We decided to move quickly, filing as soon as possible, ideally at her school. After years of humiliation, it was time for her to feel some shame. During the meeting, I also informed Bob about the changes I'd made to Tyndall's finances. As CFO, I had the authority to move money between accounts, but I hadn't stolen any. I simply made it harder for them to access. Bob wasn't thrilled about my actions. "Joe, if this results in any financial loss to Tyndall, they could sue you," he warned. "And what will they get? I don't have anything worth suing for. Besides, I'd love for them to take me to court. They wouldn't want the public to know why I did it." I wasn't worried. Tyndall's dirty laundry was better kept hidden. Bob then informed me of his $3,000 retainer fee. Within a week, I had 3 meetings with manufacturers who were interested in both my expertise and access to my patents. I didn't need to stay in town anymore. I had friends who would help, but I wasn't about to burden them. My only way out of this mess was to rise above it and start over, at 43 years old. Then, a week later, Bob called. He'd just left the county attorney's office, where Edward had been screaming about embezzlement, wire fraud, and grand theft. Bob calmly explained that all the funds were still in Tyndall's active accounts, and nothing had been withdrawn. Edward would just need to arrange for a new signer on the account, which would require a painful trip to the Caymans, something he hated more than anything. A month later, Carol was served with divorce papers. Bob called to ask if I had returned her calls. I laughed at the thought. Of course, I hadn't responded to any of her messages. Calls, texts, emails, nothing. There were 2 main issues blocking the divorce. Carol was fighting me over taking Sam's college fund and car, Even Bob thought that would be hard to get past a judge. My response? Fine. I'd give them half of the college fund. But if that wasn't enough, I'd file a fraud claim, since I'd been led to believe I was Sam's father for the past 16 years and paid for all his expenses. I'd sue Carol, Eric, Sally, and Edward. I might not win, but it would be a media circus, and I'd make sure their dirty laundry aired for the world to see. A week later, Bob called again. Carol was willing to sign the papers if I agreed to spend 1 hour with her. She wanted to explain or justify her actions. I didn't care. I had no desire to see her, but I knew I had to close this chapter for good. I agreed, under the condition that it would just be the two of us, and I insisted on recording the meeting to protect myself. After what I'd been through over the past 17 years, I wasn't taking any chances. At 3 p.m. the following week, I parked my rental car in front of my old house. I didn't see any cars that made me nervous, so I walked to the front door. It opened almost immediately. Carol had clearly been waiting. I couldn't help but notice the absence of the usual attempts to seduce me. No fancy dress, no favorite meal in the oven, no special drink waiting for me. She'd made it clear this wasn't going to be a reunion. The divorce papers sat between us, a stark symbol of the end. While the paperwork was just a formality, the marriage had already been shattered long ago. She offered me a drink, but I declined. There was no need for pleasantries or small talk anymore. I didn't care how she was, so I didn't ask. Instead, I simply told her it was her turn to speak. For the next 15 minutes, she recited the same tired script I'd heard countless times. Apologies, excuses, and pleas to work things out. Nothing new, nothing sincere. She even tried to justify her actions by mentioning how Edward had forgiven my mother. I couldn't resist, and in sharp, frustrated letters on the envelope, I wrote the numbers. 408 freaking. She didn't argue. I barely reacted. Her words had lost their power over me. She tried again, asking if I had questions. I gave her a blank stare and asked, "Why?" With a sigh, she began her explanation. She spoke of being coerced into using Eric's seed to have a child, of family pressure, and Edward's obsession with the Tyndall bloodline. She claimed she had hoped I would be the one to father her child, but things had spiraled out of control. She said she had wanted us to be a family, but she admitted to screwing it up. Her reasoning didn't sit right with me. I told her I couldn't accept her twisted logic. To think that the idea of Eric's child would somehow bond our family was absurd, but she kept trying to defend her actions. She said that continuing to be with Eric after Sam's conception was about her, not me. It was her way of coping with her need for humiliation, her craving for something rough. She claimed she went back to Eric because his love was different. Rough, intense, everything she couldn't find with me. She said it wasn't about me being a bad lover. It was about something she couldn't explain. I was tender and loving, but she felt she needed to be taken down a peg to experience the brutality that Eric gave her. In her mind, it wasn't a reflection of me. It was a flaw in her. I let her talk, but the more she spoke, the more disgusted I became. She tried to frame everything as a deep personal flaw, something she needed to do to feel humbled. She admitted to using Eric for rough sex, as a way to break down her own arrogance, to humble herself. But I wasn't buying it. She had hurt me, betrayed me, and now she was trying to rewrite the story as if it was all some therapy session gone wrong. When she mentioned how she had always kept her affairs with Eric separate from me, I pressed further, asking details I didn't want to know. Had she ever had intimacy with him on the same day as with me? She hesitated, then admitted there had been times. She tried to justify it, claiming she would douche afterward, but the damage was done. The more she spoke, the more it became clear that she was trying to shield herself, to somehow paint her actions as less hurtful than they were. But no matter what she said, it was clear that her betrayal was not just physical. It was emotional, mental, and deeply personal. It was a lie wrapped in 1,000 excuses, and I wasn't interested in hearing anymore. I'd heard enough. After lunch at Mama Anna's, the lasagna in my stomach churned violently, boiling like molten lava. The thought that I had unknowingly eaten Eric's seed coming from my wife pushed me past the breaking point. I couldn't control it. Vomit exploded from my mouth, hitting the table and splattering Carol with my half-digested meal. Stumbling out the door, I left a trail of food behind, the sound of Carol's sobs echoing in my ears. Honestly, I didn't care how much she hated the mess. It was nothing compared to what she'd done to me. 2 weeks later, my attorney had to reprint the divorce papers because no one at the courthouse wanted to touch the original ones. When it was finally signed, I got half of the college fund and car proceeds, while she kept the house until Sam finished high school. I figured he probably hated me, but since he had chosen to cut me out of his life, I had no reason to stick around or pay child support. If the court tried to force me, I'd switch the grounds to adultery and sue the whole damn Tyndall family for fraud. No one wanted that kind of scandal. During my retreat from the world, I found myself hesitating to watch the videos I had downloaded from Eric's office. I wasn't ready to see two people I despised in the most intimate way possible. But one file caught my eye. A small one labeled Sindra. That name stopped me cold. Sindra was married to one of my closest friends, John Brown. John and I had never been particularly close in high school. He was a jock, and I was the nerd. But I'd helped him with English when he was struggling, and over time, we became friends. After he graduated, we lost touch, but later he returned to our town, looking for work. I recommended him for a job, and we picked up our friendship from where we'd left off. A couple of years ago, things between John and Sindra had gone south. She'd gotten drunk or maybe sedated at a girls' night out and slept with another man. She confessed to John right away, but the damage was done. They had 2 young kids, and divorce was a terrible option. I clicked on the file. The video started with Sindra stumbling into a hotel room looking dazed. It was clear from her movements she was out of it, probably still drunk or sedated. Eric appeared, undressing her without a word, and I felt sick to my stomach. The scene played out like a cold, detached act, not one of love, but of pure physicality. Eric didn't care. He had his fun, grabbed a drink afterward, and then, without speaking, Sindra shuffled off to the bathroom, dressed, and left. The whole thing felt like a nightmare. John had always wanted answers, and now I had them. I decided to show him the video in case he ever needed proof. I invited him over one evening to talk, offering him a couple of beers to steady his nerves. After a while, he asked what this private discussion was about. "John, I found a video of your wife with another man. I can either tell you who it is, show you the video, or both. Which one hurts the least?" I kept my voice steady, but inside I was boiling with anger and disgust. It took him a moment to process. His eyes welled up and he breathed deeply. I didn't say anything but placed a hand on his shoulder for support. "Who?" he finally asked. "Eric," I said, watching his face change. "It looks like she was sedated or drunk. It wasn't her choice." John was stunned. "But she hates him. Why would she sleep with Eric?" I nodded. "She was out of it. I'll show you the video, and you'll see she wasn't in control." He watched in silence, his face growing pale as the video played. Afterward, he just stared at me, trying to absorb the reality of what had happened. "Why?" he asked quietly, barely able to keep it together. "Why would he do that to her?" "John, my guess is that he didn't even know her last name. He saw a drunk woman and took what he wanted. He probably didn't care who she was. She was just a target." John was silent, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the humiliation. He had to live with this knowledge now, just like I had to live with knowing what Carol had done to me. John stood up, his eyes heavy with emotion. "Thanks, Joe. This is helping more than I thought. I'm glad I forgave her back then. I knew she was sorry, but now I know the truth. I'm not sure if I'll ever tell Sindra, but I'll figure it out. Can I keep the video?" "Of course," I replied. "It's probably the only copy." John paused, looking at me with a half smile. "Would you be mad if Eric had a few accidents over the next few months?" I shrugged. "It would work in my favor. I've already kicked him in the nuts once, so I'll be a suspect anyway. Just let me know when so I can cover my tracks." "Thanks, Joe. You're a better brother than I ever had." We shared a brief hug before he left, calling over his shoulder, "Keep in touch." I spent little time watching the videos of Carol and Eric. It was too much to handle, and I had no interest in reliving the mess they'd made of my life. Eventually, I deleted the files with Carol's name on them, until fate took a cruel turn. I accidentally hit play instead of delete. What I saw was more revolting than I could have imagined. Carol, on her knees, had a look of pure ecstasy on her face as Eric pounded into her. It wasn't love. It was pure animalistic sex. He held a leash attached to her neck with one hand, the other pulling her hair to make her look at the camera. Between breaths, he shouted, "Bark like a dog, witch!" And she did. It felt like my heart had been ripped out. The woman I loved, the one I'd built my life around, was reduced to this, degrading herself in ways I never thought possible. That moment destroyed everything I once thought I knew about her. 2 weeks later, John came by for a beer, still processing everything. He thanked me again for showing him the truth about Sindra, how it wasn't an affair, but maltreatment. He had plans to use the remaining videos to expose Eric's crimes, helping other men who had been victimized by him. I handed over the rest of the files without hesitation. Meanwhile, I was moving on. I'd started looking for new job opportunities, and it paid off when Donen Corporation reached out to me. They offered me an interview 100 miles away. It was the first thing that had brought me some relief in months. I made myself available whenever they wanted to meet. The interview with Tim Donen, the CEO, went smoothly. He made it clear he didn't like being called Mr. Donen, just Tim. The job offer came with a solid package. But there was one condition. I had to meet with the head of Reynolds Resources for a personality evaluation. Given everything I'd been through, I had my doubts about how they'd assess me. The next morning, I showed up at Reynolds Resources for my evaluation. It was a sharp contrast to Donen's basic office, modern and sleek. After a brief wait, I was greeted by Mickey D. Reynolds, the owner. She was an attractive woman in her early 30s, with a firm handshake and a friendly smile. Our conversation was easy, focused on my background and my philosophy of engineering. Mickey was professional, but she let me share what I felt comfortable with. When she asked why I left Tyndall, I simply said I'd been passed over for a promotion and felt underpaid for my work. At 11:45, she glanced at the clock. "I'll send my report to Tim and he'll follow up with you," she said. "I bet you're hungry. Want to grab lunch?" I smiled. "Would it be against company rules for me to offer? Maybe a Chamber of Commerce tour?" She smiled back. "I'd love that." That lunch turned into a series of meals over the next few months. Lunches that stretched into dinners and late-night talks. I took things slow, not rushing into anything, but enjoying every moment with her. It was clear she was also happy with the pace. We were building something real, something I hadn't expected to find. Meanwhile, back at Tyndall Manufacturing, things weren't going well financially. While they had the cash to cover bills, money was tight. Edward was forced to tap into emergency assets to keep the company afloat, trying to prevent vendors from pulling their contracts. It seemed like Tyndall was on the edge of a cliff, and it wouldn't take much to send them over. The 160 acres of prime land near town, worth millions, had been in the Tyndall family for over a century. The idea of mortgaging it to keep the business afloat was unthinkable. But the funds from the mortgage kept the company running until Edward traveled to the Caymans to secure control over the money. However, the damage to the company's reputation was severe. Suppliers, once willing to extend credit, now demanded cash up front, further straining their capital, and the mortgage went unpaid, as the Cayman funds slowly made their way back to the U.S. As things unraveled, Mickey D. learned the details of my personal and business struggles. She sympathized, having lost her husband in a tragic accident when a UPS truck ran him over 2 years earlier. She had held Reynolds Resources together in his absence. Meanwhile, John informed me that Eric had been attacked in a bar parking lot. Beaten with a steel pipe, Eric begged for mercy, before his attacker broke his finger, saying, "That's for sticking your finger in my wife." I found a sense of peace in my new job at Donen Corporation. I settled in quickly, and without a non-compete clause from Tyndall, I began luring their top customers. Unlike Eric, I didn't rely on flashy sales tactics. I simply knew how to deliver better products, faster and cheaper. Eric, meanwhile, seemed to be a target, injured frequently after nights out at bars. 6 months after my divorce, my relationship with Mickey D. was growing stronger. She was beautiful, smart, and a joy to be around. We started spending more time together, and our closeness became physical. One night, it became clear she was interested in taking things further. After a particularly intimate moment, she asked, "Shall we leave now?" "Absolutely," I replied, kissing her passionately. We couldn't keep our hands off each other on the way back to her place. Once there, the tension between us was palpable. Slowly, we undressed each other. "Did you bring protection?" she whispered. "I'm sterile," I admitted. "That's why Carol had Eric's baby." Mickey was taken aback. "No doctor? The same mother who lied to you about who fathered you? I'd get a second opinion." She didn't want to risk pregnancy, so she gave me 3 choices: my mouth, my hands, or my feet. "Feet?" I asked, confused. "Yeah, your feet leaving my apartment," she teased. 5 seconds to decide. With my mind clouded by desire, I quickly answered, "Mouth." "Good choice," she smiled. In a flash, she positioned herself over me, and I barely had time to respond before she was guiding me with her hands. We both reached our limits before morning, after a marathon of pleasure. Afterward, we discussed my fertility. I agreed to see a specialist for a seed test. The results were revealing. I had about 25 million seed, far below the average range of 50 to 100 million. My seed mobility was average, but the doctor said there was no immediate concern. Some lifestyle adjustments, like vitamins and cutting back on drinking, might improve things, but I wasn't infertile. Mickey was satisfied with the results, and we moved forward, knowing our relationship had deepened in ways I never expected. The best way to get pregnant, according to the doctor, was not to obsess over it. He likened it to roulette, a game of chance where my limited swimmers simply hadn't hit the target. Slim odds, but not impossible. Mickey decided to go back on birth control, and I used protections for a couple of months as we figured out our next steps. Around Christmas, we started talking about moving in together, planning to make it official after the new year. But first, Mickey wanted me to meet her parents. She told them she was dating someone special, and they wanted me to visit. It felt like the first step toward having a real family again. I was nervous as we pulled up to their large but unpretentious house. The door opened, and Mickey stepped forward to hug a man in a red Christmas sweater. Turning to me, she said, "Daddy, I'd like you to meet Joe Tyndall." Before she could finish, I interrupted. "Tim? As in Tim Donan? Wow, I didn't know you were her father." Tim smiled warmly. "Well, now you do. Come on in, Joe." I turned to Mickey, astonished. "Why didn't you tell me?" She shrugged with a sly smile. "I wanted you to like me for me, not because of my last name. Plus, I didn't want people at work gossiping about you dating the boss's daughter." Her honesty was refreshing, and it helped set the tone for a warm evening with her parents. Over dinner, the conversation flowed effortlessly, and I realized just how much I liked them. By the end of the night, it felt like they would welcome me into their family without hesitation. A few weeks later, I proposed. Mickey jumped off the couch and into my arms, shouting, "Yes, yes, yes!" Her enthusiasm left me breathless, but I didn't mind. 3 months later, we had a small wedding. On my side were only John, Sindra, and a few new friends I'd made. After a honeymoon in the Caribbean, we returned home ready to start our life together. One of our first steps was changing our names. Mickey reverted to her maiden name, Donan, and I took the same last name, officially becoming Joseph Timothy Donan. When we asked for Tim's blessing, his reaction was priceless. With tears in his eyes, he whispered, "Thank you, son." Meanwhile, John uncovered a video of Carol and Eric and decided to settle some scores. Through his son Tyler, who attended the same school as Carol's students, John obtained a list of text numbers for senior boys. Using a new account, he sent the video to several of them under the title Principal Freaking Class 101. A week later, Carol experienced the fallout. As she walked through the halls between classes, she heard barking. At first, she thought it was just a coincidence, but as the barking followed her from one group of smirking boys to another, she grew uneasy. She checked her clothes, worried something was out of place, but saw nothing amiss. When she entered her office, the barking stopped, but it resumed the moment she stepped out again. By the end of the day, it sounded like an entire kennel had been unleashed in the school. The next morning was even worse. The moment she stepped into the parking lot, it was as if the entire student body had turned into dogs, barking and howling in unison. The noise followed her everywhere, echoing through the halls like a taunt she couldn't escape. Carol rushed into the building, focusing only on the concrete ahead of her, avoiding the mocking voices behind her. The door shut with a sigh of relief, but as she walked to her office, a voice cut through the tension. "Bark like a dog, witch! Bark like a dog!" It sounded like Eric's. What was he doing here? Suddenly it hit her like a ton of bricks. The boys must have gotten hold of one of the videos from Eric. She didn't need to dwell on how it got out. All she could think about was the fallout. Her career, dignity, and job were on the line. Panicked, she rushed into her office, slamming the door behind her. Did the staff know? Had anyone seen the video? What was she supposed to do now? By the time the first class hour was halfway over and the halls were quiet, Carol bolted from her office, shouting she was sick and needed to go home. But she didn't go home. She sped straight to Tyndall Manufacturing. Bursting into Eric's office, she seethed. "Did you leak the videos? If you did, I swear I'll liquidate you." Eric, feeling the heat of her anger, quickly stammered, "No, I've still got all the videos. I'm the only one who has them." He patted his computer and pulled up the file to prove it. "Stupid idiot," Carol hissed. "You've been hacked. The videos are everywhere and I'm ruined." Crumpling to the floor, she sobbed, overwhelmed. Eric, unsure of what to do, ran to his father's office. The two of them rushed back to Carol, who was still crying uncontrollably. Their solution? Take her home, shut the door, and return to work as though nothing had happened. 5 years later, Carol lost her position as principal. Her reputation had been shattered, and the staff, students, and board no longer respected her. A new role was created for her, one where she worked in a basement office, reviewing state and national education guidelines. There was little interaction with colleagues or students. She started each day at 6 a.m., wearing flannel pajamas and slippers, leaving before school let out. Her new life was a social prison. She was forced to shop out of town to avoid ridicule, while her son Sam often got sent home for fighting. It was hard for him to ignore the taunts from classmates, who called his mother Lassie the Wonder Dog. At first, some men sent her dog biscuits with phone numbers attached, hoping for a response. But Carol had long since given up on love. Meanwhile, Tyndall Manufacturing's fortunes plummeted after my departure. Customers flocked to Donen Manufacturing, and Eric's poor leadership, combined with rising operational costs, led to the company's collapse. In order to cover mounting debts, Edward was forced to sell the family's 160-acre farm, which was developed into mid-priced housing. The company was sold, and Edward, now in financial ruin, rented a small apartment with Sally. When they passed, the Tyndall name would be forgotten save for the gravestones. Eric and Sam left town, starting new lives as a used car salesman and a fast food worker. On July 1st, the new owners called for an all-staff meeting to introduce the new president. Edward and Eric were uninvited. The shop foreman, John Brown, addressed the crowd. "Let me introduce you to our new president, Mr. Joe Donen." The staff was relieved the company had been sold to a competitor, not a faceless conglomerate. But the real surprise came when I walked out from the office. The room went silent as people stared, trying to place me. "Hello, everyone. It's good to be back here." "Miss me?" The room erupted into cheers. Apparently, Eric hadn't been the leader everyone had hoped for. After assuring the employees of the positive changes to come, they began chanting my name. "Donen! Donen! Donen!" "Thank you for the warm welcome," I said. "This is going to be a great new chapter for all of us." I smiled and added, "Now, let me introduce you to my family, my wife, Mickey D., and our son, Timothy Joseph Donen." Yes, the DNA test confirmed he was mine.